You walk into a room and the conversation stops, just for a second, maybe two. But in that moment, something cold settles in your chest because you know they were talking about you. Or maybe they weren't. But your brain has already decided, hasn't it? It's written the story, cast you as the villain, and now you're standing there with a smile plastered on your face while your inner voice whispers the same familiar lie. Everyone secretly dislikes you. This isn't just insecurity talking. This is something deeper, more systematic, more devastating. It's the quiet conviction that behind every polite smile lies judgment, that beneath every friendly conversation sits tolerance at best, irritation at worst. You scan faces for micro-expressions of disgust. You replay conversations searching for hidden meanings. You apologize for existing before anyone even suggests you should. And here's what makes this so cruel. The very thing that convinces you everyone dislikes you is often the thing that makes you incredibly likable. Your sensitivity to others' emotions, your careful attention to how you affect people, your desire not to burden anyone with your presence. These aren't character flaws. They're signs of a deeply empathetic mind. But somewhere along the way, that empathy turned inward and became a weapon against yourself. Today, we're diving into the psychology behind this universal human experience. Because if you've ever felt like you're somehow fundamentally unlikable, if you've ever wondered why you assume the worst about what others think of you, if you've ever felt like you're performing friendship rather than living it, then you need to understand what's really happening in your mind. This isn't about building confidence or positive thinking. This is about understanding the invisible forces that convinced you that you're the exception to human connection. The first thing you need to know is that this feeling has a name. Psychologists call it rejection sensitivity. But that clinical term doesn't capture the full weight of what you experience. It's not just sensitivity, it's a complete reorganization of how you perceive social reality. Your brain becomes a detective, but one that only looks for evidence of guilt. Every pause in conversation becomes proof of discomfort. Every unreturned text becomes confirmation of annoyance. Every group laugh that you weren't part of becomes evidence that you're the joke. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't random. This doesn't happen to you by accident. Rejection sensitivity often begins in childhood, in those crucial years when your brain is learning how relationships work. Maybe you had a parent who withdrew love as punishment. Maybe you were the kid who got picked last, excluded from birthday parties, made to feel like your enthusiasm was too much, your needs too burdensome. Maybe you learned early that love was conditional, that acceptance had to be earned, that you were always one mistake away from being cast out. And so your young brain, brilliant and adaptive as it was, developed a strategy. If rejection is inevitable, then at least you can see it coming. If people are going to leave, at least you can brace for impact. Your mind became hypervigilant, scanning for the first signs of disinterest, the subtle shifts in tone that signal withdrawal. You learned to read rooms like weather patterns, predicting storms before the first cloud appeared. This was survival. This was intelligence. This was your nervous system trying to protect you from the thing it learned to fear most, abandonment. But what saved you then is suffocating you now. Because that same hypervigilant system that once kept you safe now interprets neutral expressions as hostile. It reads natural social rhythms as rejection. It turns normal human inconsistency into evidence of your fundamental unlikability. The cruel irony is that this creates exactly what it fears. When you're convinced people don't like you, you behave differently. You become smaller, quieter, more apologetic. You laugh too hard at jokes that aren't funny. You agree with opinions you don't hold. You perform enthusiasm you don't feel. And people can sense this performance, not because they dislike you, but because authenticity is magnetic and performance is exhausting to witness. So you end up in this terrible cycle. You perform because you think you're unlikable. The performance creates distance because it's not really you. The distance confirms your belief that you're unlikable, and the cycle continues, getting stronger each time until you're so far from yourself that you've forgotten who you actually are beneath all that careful curation. But there's something even more sinister happening here. Your brain doesn't just assume people dislike you. It starts collecting evidence to prove it. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, but in the context of rejection sensitivity, it becomes something more destructive. It becomes a systematic rewriting of your social history. That time your friend didn't text back, not because they were busy, but because they were annoyed with you. That moment someone seemed distracted during your conversation, not because they had something on their mind, but because you were boring them. Your mind becomes an unreliable narrator of your own life, editing out moments of genuine connection and highlighting every instance of perceived rejection. You remember the times you felt excluded, but forget the times you were specifically included. You recall the conversations that felt awkward, but erase the ones that flowed naturally. Your brain curates a highlight reel of social failures while the successes fade into background noise. And this is where the real damage happens, because when you consistently misinterpret neutral social cues as negative, when you assume worst-case scenarios in every interaction, when you treat temporary unavailability as permanent rejection, you start to change how you show up in relationships. You become the person who apologizes for calling, who assumes they're bothering people by existing, who interprets every natural ebb and flow of friendship as evidence of decline. The fascinating thing is that this often happens to the most emotionally intelligent people. Those who can read subtle social cues, who notice when someone seems off, who pick up on energy shifts that others miss. Your emotional intelligence becomes hyperactive, like an immune system that starts attacking healthy tissue. You're so good at reading people that you read rejection into places it doesn't exist. This explains why you can have friends who genuinely care about you, who enjoy your company, who value your presence, and yet you still feel like you're somehow fooling them. Like eventually they'll see through your act and realize what you've known all along. That you're too much, too little, too weird, too boring, too something. That underneath it all you're fundamentally unlovable. But what if that story is wrong? What if the voice in your head that narrates your social interactions isn't telling the truth? What if the evidence you've been collecting has been filtered through a lens so distorted that it's showing you a reality that doesn't actually exist? Exist? What if the reason you think everyone secretly dislikes you has nothing to do with your actual likability and everything to do with a nervous system that learned to survive by expecting the worst? Because here's what nobody tells you about rejection sensitivity. It's not actually about other people. It's about the relationship you have with uncertainty. Think about it. Most social interactions exist in grey areas. That pause before someone responds to your text could mean anything. They're busy, they're thinking, they're in a meeting, they're dealing with their own problems. But uncertainty feels dangerous to a mind that learned early that rejection was always possible. So your brain fills in the blanks with the worst possible explanation. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. This is where the psychology gets really interesting. Your brain would rather be right about something terrible than wrong about something good. Because being wrong about rejection means being caught off guard, being surprised by abandonment. And if there's one thing your nervous system can't tolerate, it's being blindsided by the thing it fears most. So you develop what psychologists call a negativity bias in social situations. You give more weight to one perceived slight than to 10 genuine compliments. You remember the person who seemed uninterested in your story, but forget the 5 people who were engaged. You focus on the invitation you didn't receive while ignoring all the ones you did. Your attention becomes a spotlight that only illuminates evidence of rejection. But here's where this gets truly devastating. This selective attention doesn't just change how you see the world, it changes how you behave in it. When you're constantly bracing for rejection, you start doing things that actually push people away. Not because they dislike you, but because your fear of rejection creates the very distance you're trying to avoid. You become the person who needs constant reassurance but feels guilty for asking for it, who reads hidden meanings into innocent comments, who pulls back first to avoid being left behind, who says sorry so much that people start to wonder what you're apologizing for. These behaviors aren't character flaws, they're survival strategies that your nervous system developed to protect you from a pain it believes is inevitable. And this is where the real tragedy lies. The part of you that's convinced everyone dislikes you is often the part that cares most deeply about connection. You don't assume the worst because you're cynical. You assume the worst because relationships matter to you so much that the thought of losing them feels unbearable. Your rejection sensitivity isn't proof that you're unlikable. It's proof that you're someone who values human connection so deeply that your nervous system has appointed itself as the guardian of your social survival. But that guardian has become overprotective. It's like having a security system that goes off every time a leaf falls. Yes, It might catch a real intruder, but mostly it's just making noise about things that aren't actually threats. Your nervous system is trying to protect you from social rejection by seeing it everywhere, even where it doesn't exist. This is why you can be in a room full of people who genuinely enjoy your company and still feel like you're somehow performing, pretending, waiting for them to figure out that you don't belong there. Because your internal alarm system is so sensitive that it interprets normal social fluctuations as danger signals. Someone checking their phone becomes proof they're bored with you. A moment of silence becomes evidence that you've said something wrong. A friend cancelling plans becomes confirmation that they never wanted to spend time with you in the first place. The exhausting part is how much mental energy this requires. You're constantly running background calculations on every interaction, analysing tone of voice, facial expressions, response times, word choices. You're like a social detective, but one who's only looking for evidence of crimes that probably aren't being committed. This hypervigilance is mentally and emotionally draining, which is why social interactions can feel so exhausting, even when they go well. And here's something that might surprise you. People who struggle with rejection sensitivity are often incredibly skilled at making others feel comfortable and valued. Because you know what it feels like to feel rejected, you go out of your way to make sure others don't experience that pain. You're the friend who remembers important details, who checks in when someone seems off, who makes space for others to be themselves. Your sensitivity to rejection has made you exquisitely attuned to other people's emotional needs, but somewhere along the way, you learned that this care and attention was a one-way street, that you were responsible for making others feel good, but expecting the same in return was asking too much. You became the emotional caretaker in your relationships while simultaneously believing that your own emotional needs were burdensome. This creates a fundamental imbalance where you're constantly giving from an empty cup while assuming that others see your need for connection as neediness. The truth is, the very qualities that make you assume people dislike you are often the qualities that make you deeply lovable. Your awareness of others' emotions, your consideration of how your actions affect people, your desire to create comfort and belonging. These aren't flaws to be fixed. They're gifts that have been distorted by a nervous system that learned to interpret love as conditional and acceptance as temporary. As conditional and acceptance as temporary. So here's what I need you to understand. That voice telling you everyone secretly dislikes you isn't your intuition. It's not your wisdom. It's not even accurate most of the time. It's a frightened child inside you who learned that love was dangerous, that connection came with conditions, that safety meant always being prepared for abandonment, and that child has been running your social life ever since. But you're not that child anymore. You have choice now. You can choose to question the story your mind tells you about what that pause in conversation means. You can choose to consider that maybe, just maybe, people actually enjoy your company. You can choose to notice the moments of genuine connection that your brain has been editing out of your experience. The work isn't to convince yourself that everyone loves you. The work is to stop assuming that everyone doesn't, to create space between the fear and the reality, to recognize that your rejection sensitivity isn't a character flaw, but a survival mechanism that's outlived its usefulness. And most importantly, to understand that the person who's been rejecting you most consistently isn't other people, it's you. You've been so busy protecting yourself from imaginary rejection that you've been rejecting yourself in real time, apologizing for your existence, minimizing your needs, performing a version of yourself you think is more palatable. But what if the most radical thing you could do is simply show up as yourself and trust that that's enough, because the truth is, it always has been.